Hi again. This second question asks to describe how external funds, either where you've been PI or others have affected your career trajectory. So I started working on grants immediately out of graduate school. I had the good fortune of being part of a rather large research center where I had a coordinator position that looked a lot like maybe what you would think of as a postdoc. But the difference, I think, in some ways were that I had 4 years to have that space. And I also, while I didn't have complete ownership over what my research agenda was at that point in time, I had really amazing mentors that had great guidance for me as well as my colleagues that were sort of in the same junior space over those 4 years. And so immediately out of my graduate career, I learned about how grants operate and how they look in practice, what it means to collaborate with scholars across universities, how budgets work, how project management works. All of that was a sort of in vivo learning experience, and I was really, really fortunate to have that. So that's where I started learning about grants. And I was just a coordinator on that project, so I certainly didn't have a leadership role, but I got to observe what the leaders really were, how they were structuring and contributing to that center. And Scott was part of that center, and as were some other colleagues from the University of Kansas at the time, the Ohio State University, and Dynamic Measurement Group out in Oregon. So that was a really unique experience. At the end of that project, so 4 years, that would have been 2012, I knew that I wanted to stay in research and continue on a path that paralleled some of the things we had done in that center and critique. So I was able to craft my first IES application, but I only did it on the shoulders of those mentors in that group. I had a lot of guidance about how to craft an IES proposal, how to really make it strong and compelling, how to present a good hook. I think there must have been, 10 drafts of that first proposal, many, many reviews. And the first time that it went in, it was rejected. I then revised it and resubmitted, and then it was funded. So that started my research path, and it became the first stepping stone in a journey of developing a research agenda that has been entirely self-funded, but it has been a really satisfying, first trimester of my career, the first 10 years of my career. So those funds, I wouldn't say they explicitly defined my career trajectory, but they certainly shaped how I thought I would continue the work, that the logical extension of the IGD work that I was funded on originally has grown into multiple grants. So my first IES grant was in 2012 or 13, and now I'm on my fifth IES grant, and that work has logically extended IGD work through that continuum. And I've, since that time, been PI on those 5, and then had really good fortune to be an investigator on others, and I enjoy both roles. So project management, I've learned to refine over time by being the PI, and that's continued to inform how I want to push my work trajectory. But then I also get to be a substantive content contributor to other projects, and that's also really fun because then you don't have to manage the day-to-day of the grant, the study rollout and the budgets, etc. But you do get to contribute to the big ideas and the challenging thinking, which is really engaging and of high value to me, at least. So those different roles have certainly impacted how I think about the research that I do and how the things that I've learned along the way, my evolving thinking about early language literacy and assessment. For parenting intervention, for that work, I was an investigator. There's 3 of us that co-sought a foundation grant, and I didn't lead the grant, but we had sort of siloed expertise. I was the curricular development for that particular grant, so I had ownership of a particular portion of the grant, but really enjoyed working in a different lens than the IES grants that I've had. So on the foundation funds, we worked in a community-based participatory research framework, and that was a big learning experience for me, and it made me crave sort of more of that on the road, on the ground, I guess is a better way to say that, application of research to practice. And it has solidified my commitment to engaging in research that tries to narrow the research to practice gap, even when I'm working on language and literacy. So right now, my current interest is pushing more on database decision making, how teachers actually use language and literacy data, and that's a function of really being on the ground in the field and seeing sort of what the potential is for using outcomes to inform student performance, and knowing from other projects how impactful useful tools on the ground can be, like the family intervention stuff that I've done, the parenting intervention, and what the outcomes were that we achieved with that project. So the nature of external funds have definitely affected my career trajectory. They haven't driven it in isolation, though. It's not as though I get a grant and I say, oh, I'm going to go do that now, right? The grants that I'm seeking align with a sort of predetermined research agenda that I have. I certainly could imagine a place where a researcher who's interested in research but doesn't want to lead research piecemeals together a research career in a way that they're out of the driver's seat, right? That they are being placed on projects that other people have conceptual ideas for, and in that way the funding might be telling them exactly what they're going to be doing. That's just not been my path, but it certainly is one option if you're interested in participating in research but not leading research. There are many, I'm sure, coordinator type positions needed across a variety of projects here at the university and at other universities. I think the farther along I get in my research career, the more on balance I think about what it means to be self-funded and seeking grants as my full-time effort. And I honestly don't want to do it forever. I really love about grant writing that you get to push the boundaries on thinking and try to engage in new big ideas that maybe are not resolved in respective fields. And so sometimes the questions that we ask in grants are unknown entities, and we work really hard to support resolution of those questions with data and findings from our studies. And that's really exciting to be able to be in that space of thinking about new ways to answer longstanding or new problems. I love that part of it a lot. What I don't like is sort of the rigmarole of watching grant cycles and recognizing where holes are and figuring out what the next puzzle pieces to fit in that soft funding cycle system. And so I think that steals a little bit from the genuine sort of inquiry that happens in grants when you get them, because you have one foot in the working space and another foot out the door trying to figure out where it's going to land. So that makes how grants factor into my future work trajectory a little bit unknown. And I only say a little bit because I certainly think that for the rest of my career I will seek grants. I'm not certain that it'll be at the volume and intensity that I've been in the past 10 years. So I think those are things that factor into how it drives my future career trajectory.